Hunger. It is the most primal signal the body possesses. A biological alarm clock that rings when you need fuel. You eat, the alarm stops, and you carry on. It is a cycle of satisfaction. But imagine, for a moment, that the alarm never stops ringing. Imagine a hunger so profound, so biologically broken, that it transforms from a survival instinct into a tortured compulsion. In the late 18th century, a man walked the streets of France who was a living medical impossibility. He could consume a meal meant for 15 heavily built soldiers in a single sitting, yet he remained as thin as a rail. He could swallow stones, corks, and live animals without hesitation. His name was Tarrare. And for the doctors who studied him, he wasn't just a patient. He was a waking nightmare, a biological furnace that burned so hot, steam would literally rise from his skin after he fed. He is the subject of one of the most disturbing entries in medical history. A man who started as a curiosity, became a soldier, and ended as a suspect in the disappearance of a 14-month-old child. This is not a myth. This is the clinical reality of the man with the bottomless stomach. To understand the horror of Tarrare, we must first understand the environment that produced him. Born around 1772 near Lyon, France, his early life is a blur of rural poverty. But by the time he hit his teenage years, it became clear that something in his physiology was deeply, catastrophically wrong. His appetite was described as polyphagia, a clinical term for excessive, insatiable hunger. But this wasn't just a boy who liked to eat. This was a biological imperative that bankrupted his family. No matter how much food they gave him, he screamed for more. Eventually, unable to sustain the cost of feeding him, his own parents cast him out. He was a teenager, homeless, and starving. But Tarrare found a way to survive. He turned his curse into a show. He joined a band of traveling charlatans, thieves, and prostitutes who toured the French countryside. Here, Tarrare became the main attraction. He would stand before a crowd and swallow corks, flints, and entire baskets of apples. He would swallow stones just to hear the crowd gasp. But then came the War of the First Coalition. The French Revolution was in full swing, and the army needed bodies. Tarrare enlisted. This is where the medical record truly begins. In the army, a soldier's ration is strictly controlled. For Tarrare, a single ration was like a single grain of rice. He began to deteriorate. He grew weak. He was caught scavenging through garbage heaps, fighting stray dogs for scraps of offal in the gutters. He was eventually admitted to a military hospital near the Rhine. And it was there that he met the man who would document his nightmare. Dr. Pierre-François Percy, the chief surgeon of the army. Dr. Percy was a man of science, a man who had seen the gruesome injuries of war. But he had never seen anything like Tarrare. Percy, along with his colleague, Dr. Corville, decided to test the limits of this anomaly. They secured quadruple rations for Tarrare, enough food to feed 4 grown men for a day. Tarrare consumed it all in minutes. And then, he looked at the doctors with hollow eyes, signaling that he was still starving. Dr. Percy realized that standard food would never be enough. To understand the beast, they had to stop treating him like a human and start observing him like a specimen. What followed was a series of experiments that would stain the pages of medical history forever. Before we detail the experiments, we must look at the physical reality of the subject. Dr. Percy's notes give us a vivid, almost sensory description of Tarrare's body. He weighed only about 100 pounds at age 17. He was average height, but his mouth was a deformity. Percy noted that Tarrare had an abnormally wide mouth with almost no lips. His teeth were heavily stained, likely from the acids of constant digestion and the consumption of non-food items. But the most disturbing detail was his skin. When his stomach was empty, the skin of his abdomen hung so loosely that he could grab the folds and wrap them entirely around his waist, like a belt of flesh. But when he ate, that same abdomen would distend, inflating like a massive balloon until it looked as though he might burst. And then, there was the smell. The medical records are very specific about this. Tarrare emitted a chronic, unbearable stench. Dr. Percy described it as fetid. It was a smell so powerful that doctors could not stand within 20 paces of him for long. It was the smell of a body that was constantly decomposing and digesting at a rate nature never intended. When he had not eaten, the smell was bad. But after he ate, it became a weapon. His eyes would become bloodshot, and his cheeks would flush. A visible steam, a sudorous vapor would rise from his body as his internal temperature skyrocketed to process the massive caloric intake. He was a biological engine running red hot. In this state, Dr. Percy decided to test his predatory instincts. In the presence of Dr. Percy and Dr. Corville, Tarrare was presented with a live cat. I want to pause here and remind you, this is a clinical account from the 1800s. There were no ethics committees. There was only curiosity. Tarrare did not hesitate. The records state he seized the animal with his teeth. In a display of feral efficiency, he tore open the abdomen to access the internal organs. He drank the crimson fluids, the blood sucking the life from the creature, before proceeding to consume the entire body. He ate the fur. He ate the skin. He left only the bones. Later, like an owl, he would regurgitate the fur and skin in a process that left the doctors stunned and horrified. He did this again with puppies. He did it with snakes and lizards. On one occasion, he swallowed a live eel whole. He had to crush the eel's head with his teeth as it went down to stop it from moving inside him. After these gorging sessions, Tarrare would not be energetic. He would fall into a stupor, a food coma, of extreme lethargy, while his body radiated that sickening heat and the fetid odor filled the ward. He was becoming less human by the day. But the military saw a use for this monster. Briefly, the army attempted to use Tarrare as a courier. The logic was simple. If he could swallow anything, he could swallow a wooden box containing secret messages, pass through enemy lines, pass the box through his system, and deliver the intel. It failed. Tarrare was captured by Prussian forces almost immediately. He was beaten, mocked, and subjected to a mock execution before being returned to the French lines. The experience broke him. He begged Dr. Percy to cure him. He didn't want to be a spy. He didn't want to be a freak. He just wanted the hunger to stop. Percy tried everything available to 18th century medicine. They fed him laudanum, a powerful opiate to dull the senses. It didn't work. They gave him tobacco pills to suppress the appetite. It didn't work. Wine vinegar, soft-boiled eggs, nothing could satiate the void in his center. And so, Tarrare began to hunt. Confined to the hospital, his behavior became erratic. He was found drinking the blood drawn from other patients. He was caught in the mortuary, attempting to consume the flesh of the dead. Dr. Percy was willing to overlook much in the name of science. But then, the line was crossed. A 14-month-old toddler disappeared from the hospital ward. There were no witnesses to the abduction. There was no ransom note. The child simply vanished from the premises. Given the layout of the hospital and the security, it was virtually impossible for an outsider to have taken the baby unnoticed. Suspicion fell immediately on Tarrare. The staff and the other patients were in an uproar. They knew what Tarrare was. They knew what he had done to the cat, the dogs, the eel. They looked at his distended stomach, and they came to the only conclusion their minds could handle. Dr. Percy, who had protected his specimen for years, could no longer defend him. Though no physical evidence of the child was found, and remember, Tarrare consumed everything, including bones. The hospital chased him out. Tarrare fled into the night, a pariah, leaving behind a mystery that has never been fully solved. Did he consume the child? The history books don't say yes explicitly, but they certainly don't say no. Tarrare vanished for 4 years. When he resurfaced in 1798, at a hospital in Versailles, the monster was dying. He wasn't dying of hunger. He was dying of tuberculosis and severe exudative diarrhea. He told the doctors he had swallowed a golden fork years ago, and that it was lodged in his insides, killing him. He died shortly after admission. And now, the doctors had one final chance to see what lay inside the man who ate everything. The autopsy was performed by a surgeon named Tessier, but it almost didn't happen. As soon as Tarrare died, his body began to rot at a terrifyingly accelerated rate. The stench, that chronic, fetid smell that had haunted him in life, became a physical barrier in death. It was so overpowering that the medical students present struggled to breathe. But Tessier pushed forward. He made the incision. What they found defied logic. Tarrare's gullet, the esophagus, was abnormally wide. So wide, in fact, that when they pried open his jaws, the surgeons could look down the canal and see directly into the stomach chamber. The stomach itself was immense. It filled almost the entire abdominal cavity, pushing the other organs aside. It was covered in ulcers and inflammation, a landscape of biological devastation. His liver and gallbladder were abnormally large, swollen from years of overprocessing toxins and fats. They searched for the golden fork Tarrare claimed to have swallowed. They never found it. They searched for foreign objects. They found none. Whatever Tarrare had eaten in his final years, garbage, animals, or worse, his body had processed it all. The smell eventually became so toxic, so unbearable, that Tessier was forced to stop. The autopsy was halted midway. The memoir on polyphagia was closed. Dr. Pierre-François Percy published his findings in the Journal de Médecine in 1805. To this day, medical professionals debate the cause of Tarrare's condition. Some suggest an extreme case of hyperthyroidism. Others suggest a damaged amygdala or hypothalamus, the parts of the brain that control hunger signals. But for Tarrare, the diagnosis didn't matter. His life was a tragedy of biology. He was a man trapped in a body that betrayed him every second of every day. A man whose very survival instinct was dialed up to a volume that drowned out his humanity. He is remembered as a monster who ate garbage and drank blood. But perhaps the true horror isn't what he did, but what he felt. Imagine a hunger that hurts, a hunger that screams, a hunger that demands you destroy everything around you, just to silence it for a moment. Tarrare died alone, rotting from the inside out, a victim of his own insatiable design. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more stories about the darkest anomalies in medical history, hit that subscribe button, and, until next time, stay hungry, or perhaps be grateful that you aren't.